119 years. That is how long the Molucca Sea had been quiet. Relatively quiet. No earthquake this powerful near this specific location since June 26, 1907. 119 years. And on April 2nd, 2026, just 1 week ago, that silence ended. Magnitude 7.4. The most powerful earthquake to rupture this zone in over a century, and almost nobody framed it that way. The headline said earthquake. Tsunami warning, 1 dead, waves lifted, move on. But the headline buried underneath all of that, the Molucca Sea just broke a 119-year record. And I want to tell you exactly what that means, because this story is so much bigger than one earthquake. It is about the most geologically bizarre piece of the Pacific Ring of Fire, a place that exists nowhere else on Earth, a place that scientists call the only active example of its kind on the entire planet, and a place that just told us, loudly, that it is very much still awake. Let me start with the record. The last earthquake this powerful at this specific location in the Molucca Sea registered magnitude 7.9, June 26, 1907. That was 119 years ago, before World War I, before commercial aviation existed, before the first Model T Ford rolled off an assembly line. The world has changed unimaginably since then, and in all that time, the Molucca Sea had not produced anything this powerful right here until April 2nd, 2026. Now, the wider region has had earthquakes of this size. The USGS confirms that 18 earthquakes exceeding magnitude 7.0 have struck the broader Molucca Sea collision zone since 1908. But this specific location, Pulau Mayu Island, the Batang Dua Islands, the exact stretch of seafloor that ruptured on April 2nd, had not seen this in 119 years. That is the record. Let that sink in for a second. And then let me tell you what actually happened when that record broke. April 2nd, 2026, 5:48 in the morning local time. The seafloor of the Molucca Sea, 35 kilometers down, that is 22 miles, ruptured. The rupture area covered 100 kilometers by 55 kilometers. That is 62 miles by 34 miles of seafloor that moved in 30 seconds. The maximum slip, how far the rock actually shifted, was just over 1 meter, more than 3 feet, in one direction, all at once, in 30 seconds. That rupture tore directly through the Batang Dua Islands, a small island group that sits right in the epicenter zone. People were asleep there, churches, schools, homes, all sitting directly on the rupture. Within minutes, a church on Mayau Island collapsed. Homes across Batang Dua were damaged. In Ternate, a city of over 205,000 people, 127 kilometers from the epicenter, the shaking lasted 10 to 20 seconds, strong enough to send people running into the streets in the dark. In Manado, a city of over 450,000 people, the Siloam Hospital had to evacuate patients. Staff set up makeshift treatment areas in the parking lot. In the city, because the hospital was no longer safe to be inside. A 70-year-old woman named a grandmother, someone's mother, died when falling debris from a collapsing building crushed her in the Minahasa district. 2 hospitals in Minahasa were heavily damaged. More than 450 structures damaged or destroyed across the region, and the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center in Honolulu issued an alert for hazardous waves within 1,000 kilometers of the epicenter. That is 620 miles of coastline, Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, all on alert at the same time. Because of this one earthquake, waves arrived within 30 minutes. The highest recorded, 0.75 meters, about 2.5 feet, hit North Minahasa. Other stations recorded waves along the coast. The warning was lifted 2 hours later. But for 2 hours, hundreds of thousands of coastal residents did not know what was coming. They ran, in the dark, before sunrise. Now, I want to explain why this place, the Molucca Sea, produces earthquakes like this, because if you understand where this happened, the earthquake stops being surprising and starts being inevitable. The Molucca Sea sits at the intersection of 3 major tectonic plates: the Sunda Plate, the Philippine Sea Plate, the Indo-Australian Plate, three plates, colliding and grinding and compressing in a relatively small body of water. But what makes the Molucca Sea completely unique on this planet is what happens between two of those plates. Scientists call it divergent double subduction. I want to explain this because it is genuinely mind-bending. In most subduction zones on Earth, you have one plate diving under another, one direction, one angle. That alone creates some of the most violent earthquakes in the world. The Cascadia Zone, Japan, Tonga, one plate going down, enormously destructive. The Molucca Sea, it had a plate called the Molucca Sea Plate that was being subducted from both sides simultaneously. The Sangihe Plate from the west, the Halmahera Plate from the east, both pulling the Molucca Sea Plate downward at the same time from opposite directions, like two people on either end of a tablecloth pulling simultaneously. The Molucca Sea Plate was squeezed from both sides, crushed, folded, and over millions of years it was completely consumed, swallowed into the mantle. The Wikipedia article for the 2026 North Maluku earthquake describes this as the only global example of an active arc-arc collision consuming an oceanic basin via subduction in two directions, the only one on Earth. And the remnants of that process, the Halmahera slab, which is the eastern part of what was the Molucca Sea Plate, are still down there, fully subducted, already underground, but still being crushed, still being forced down. Seismic tomography shows that slab has already been pushed to a depth of over 300 kilometers. That is 186 miles inside the Earth, and it is still going, still generating stress, still cracking from the pressure. And when those cracks release, April 2nd, 2026, magnitude 7.4, 119-year record. Now here is what I found really important when I dug into this. And further in the video, I want to explain something about the aftermath that most people are completely missing. But first, if this deep dive analysis is what you want from your disaster channel, give this video a like and a hype. Share it with someone who asks why the world keeps shaking. It costs you nothing, but it genuinely keeps this channel running. Okay, let's talk about the 115 number. The Wikipedia article on the 2026 North Maluku earthquake includes a detail that I want to highlight. According to the USGS, this tectonic region has been the source of 115 earthquakes exceeding magnitude 6.0 since 1908. 115 earthquakes above magnitude 6 in 118 years. That is almost one per year. Every single year, including 18 above magnitude 7. So a magnitude 7 plus earthquake happens here roughly once every 6 to 7 years on average. Not a question of if, a question of when. And this is the strongest in 119 years, which means something rare and significant happened on April 2nd. This was not just a routine large earthquake in a routinely active zone. Something in this specific section of the Halmahera collision zone released more energy than it had in 119 years. That is seismically significant. And then there are the aftershocks, because this is the part that the news dropped and forgot. 284 aftershocks had been recorded by the time tracking sites last updated their counts. And they are still coming. As recently as April 8th, yesterday, aftershocks were still being recorded in the Maluku Sea, still triggering from the rupture of April 2nd. The biggest aftershock, magnitude 6.2, hit just 5 hours after the main earthquake. A magnitude 6.2 aftershock. That alone would be a major event anywhere in the world with normal infrastructure. In a zone already cracked by a 7.4, it sent damaged buildings, already weakened, into further collapse. BMKG told residents to stay on maximum alert for at least 72 hours. Officials anticipated continued aftershock activity for 1 to 2 weeks. We are still inside that window right now, and here is something that most news reports did not put together. The rupture tore directly through the Batang Islands. These are not large, well-resourced islands. They are small, remote, and difficult to reach. The mayor of Ternate declared a 7-day state of emergency and dispatched regional disaster management teams to Batang. But getting there takes time. Getting damage assessments done takes time. Officials acknowledged that full damage numbers would be delayed because of the remoteness of the epicenter. On Mayo Island, which sits right inside the rupture zone, a church collapsed. Homes were damaged. The actual extent of what happened to those islands, to those communities, is still not fully known. That is the part of this story that is being undercovered. Not Manado, not Ternate, the tiny islands that sat directly on top of a 119-year record earthquake, and the people there who are still waiting for help to arrive. Now let me zoom out, because there is a broader pattern here that I want you to see. The Molucca Sea collision zone has had 115 earthquakes above magnitude 6 since 1908. That is the baseline. That is what normal looks like here. But within the last 12 months alone, the Molucca Sea region has seen escalating activity. In January 2026, a magnitude 6.6 earthquake struck the Maluku Sea. Then February 2026 brought further tremors. And then April 2nd, the 7.4 that broke the 119-year record, with 284 aftershocks, with a 6.2 aftershock just 5 hours later. This is a zone that was already active, and it just stepped up dramatically. Now, I want to be honest with you about what this means. Can scientists predict when the next big one comes? No. Is this specific sequence a precursor to something larger? Scientists cannot say that with certainty. What the USGS does confirm is that this region is capable of producing earthquakes in the magnitude 8 range. The historical record shows it. The 1907 earthquake that held the 119-year record was a magnitude 7.9. Right here, and the double subduction system that drives all of this is still fully operational, still consuming slabs, still building stress, still releasing it. Whether this recent sequence represents a stress redistribution that makes larger events more or less likely, that is genuinely unknown. What is known is that the system just produced its most powerful event in 119 years, and the aftershocks are still running, and the damage to remote islands is still being assessed. And 284 smaller earthquakes have been following it. That is not normal background noise. That is a system that released something large and is still adjusting. Now let me bring this home with one more layer. The Halmahera volcanic arc sits on the eastern side of this collision zone, powered by the same process. As that Halmahera slab goes deeper, it heats up. It releases fluids into the mantle wedge above it. Those fluids lower the melting point of the rock. Magma forms, and it rises. The Halmahera arc has active volcanoes sitting directly above this system. Ibu volcano, which has been one of the most active volcanoes on Earth in recent years. Dukono volcano, which erupts almost continuously. Gamkanora. These volcanoes are fed by the same subduction that just produced a 7.4 earthquake. When megathrust earthquakes struck Kamchatka, we saw volcanoes erupt. The seismic and volcanic systems are connected in exactly this region. I am not saying volcanic eruptions are incoming. What I am saying is that the Halmahera volcanic arc sits directly on top of the tectonic machinery that just shook, and it deserves watching. This is what I mean when I say nobody is talking about this. The earthquake happened. One person died. The tsunami warning lifted. Damage assessed. Move on. But the deeper story, 119 years of pressure released in 30 seconds, 284 aftershocks still running, remote island communities still waiting for full damage counts, and a volcanic arc sitting on the same system, that story was not told. Until now. Stay on this. The Molucca Sea is not done. It never is. Check out the videos in the end screen. There is a lot more moving right now across the Pacific Ring of Fire that we need to talk about. Stay safe, guys. Be aware. Look up, look down, look left, look right. Anywhere, basically. Bye-bye.